You've probably heard about the mysterious sea state of Atlantis. It was a high-tech utopia where people lived happily, but then something happened, and Atlantis disappeared from the face of the earth. Many people believe that this city lies at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. But what if we've been looking in the wrong place all this time? What if it's somewhere different from where they're trying to find it? What if all this time Atlantis was in the middle of the Sahara Desert? Well, this unexpected theory has some evidence, but to study this version, you first need to understand what Atlantis was and how we got to know about it. The very first mention of the mysterious city was in 360 BCE. Ancient philosopher Plato wrote about Atlantis. His work, Dialogues, described Atlantis as a rich land with advanced technologies. Its inhabitants were powerful, intelligent, and beautiful, like superhumans. He described in detail the structure of the city, and this was the main reason why many people believed in the existence of Atlantis. According to his records, the Atlanteans built this place in several concentric circles of black and red stone. Then they covered these circles with brass, tin, and precious metals. In the city, there were water channels on which ships sailed. The Atlanteans were sailors, so they built a passage from their city to the open sea. On the internet, you can find many drawings of Atlantis, created based on Plato's descriptions. Take a look at these drawings and an actual photo of the Eye of the Sahara. This place in the Sahara has a shape of several concentric circles. It looks as if a destroyed city left a trace on the sand. Many people have written online that the lost city was located there, but no one could prove it. Once upon a time, the Sahara was filled with rivers and lakes. In prehistoric times, there was only water there. So far, everything matches. The Eye of the Sahara was first discovered in the 1930s. This place was considered a crater from a fallen meteorite. But in the middle of the 20th century, scientists conducted a soil analysis and refuted the version with a fallen space rock. In the end, everyone agreed that this was a dome of molten rocks under which magma was raging. For millions of years, wind and water had been destroying the formed landscape and eventually made it look like perfect circles. But what if the Atlanteans once came to this place and used natural circles to build a city? In this case, we would have many traces and artifacts from this developed civilization. And yes, archaeologists did find some arrowheads, spears, oars, and other things there. But this has nothing to do with Atlantis. In the Eye of the Sahara, a multitude of Acheulean artifacts lies. It was an ancient tribe that frequented this place. For the first time, Acheulean tools appeared more than 1.5 million years ago. Some of the items found there may be 130,000 years old, and according to the records, Atlantis existed about 12,000 years ago. Archaeologists found no artificial structures in this place. There was also no debris or traces of a large city. People would have found some stuff if a big city with advanced technologies had existed here. The main supporter of this idea was one YouTube channel. It collected 1 million views and attracted the attention of many historians and anthropologists. The theory that the Eye of the Sahara is Atlantis was quickly refuted. People found too many discrepancies between this place and the description of Atlantis. The author tried to catch the viewer's attention by presenting external similarities between the natural landscape and the fictional ancient city. Another popular theory claims that Atlantis was a real continent located off the Bahamas, but then this city was swallowed up by the Bermuda Triangle. According to this legend, the city ruins still lie at the bottom of the triangle, but there's no confirmation of this theory either. Writer Charles Berlitz invented it. Adherents of this theory claim that the walls and streets in the western part of the Bahamas might be the ruins of Atlantis. But scientists disagree. They have proven that these walls are natural formations of coastal rocks. There are also rumors that the story of Atlantis was inspired by an actual historical catastrophe, the Black Sea Flood. This is the Bosporus, a strait in Turkey connecting the Black Sea and the Sea of Marmara. Around 5600 BCE, the Black Sea was twice as small as it is now and had many cities on its shores. Unfortunately, a huge flood destroyed this flourishing civilization. Within a year, cities descended underwater, and surviving inhabitants moved to foreign lands and spread stories about the flood. Maybe these stories inspired Plato to come up with Atlantis. In the 1950s, people came up with another version. Atlantis was the continent that is now Antarctica. Tens of thousands of years ago, a warm continent with a developed city shifted to the northern part of our planet because of the movement of Earth's crust. The Atlanteans couldn't adapt to the cold conditions, and Atlantis was covered with a thick layer of ice. This theory was refuted when scientists began studying the tectonic plate's nature. It turned out that Earth's crust couldn't have moved such a huge continent as Antarctica. The tectonic plates don't behave this way at all. But the main question is, was Atlantis real? No one had described it before Plato. Perhaps the philosopher came up with it. Maybe he did this to emphasize the correctness of his views on life and to identify his philosophical theories. In his works, he wrote a lot about divine and human nature and how people can destroy this nature. He spoke of decaying ideal societies because of immoral behavior and vices. The Atlanteans were once moral, spiritual people who created a utopia, but then they became greedy and mean. They destroyed their inner nature, and for this, they had to witness the destruction of their city. One night, fires and earthquakes hit Atlantis and plunged the city into the sea. The higher powers punished people for their immoral behavior, and Plato also wanted everyone to be afraid of moral decay. But judging by the descriptions of the earthquakes and fire, it may seem that Atlantis was destroyed by a volcanic eruption, as it was with the ancient Roman city of Pompeii. And such destructions have happened pretty often throughout history. Natural disasters ruined many developed cities. One of the most famous cases occurred in 1100 BCE in the Mediterranean Sea, when a volcanic eruption destroyed the highly developed Minoan society. The Minoan society existed for about 2,000 years. These people mostly lived on the islands of Crete and Santorini, located north of Crete. The Minoans had beautiful houses, a sewage system, and a developed economy. They were engaged in agriculture, grew fruits and vegetables, painted frescoes, and made jewelry. They were the first people to found the thalassocracy, an empire based on the sea. They lived off of fishing, piracy, and maritime trade. At the time, they performed cruel rituals, and their way of life was far from moral. They were used to earthquakes on the island of Santorini, so they reinforced the walls of the city with wooden beams, but they didn't know what a volcanic eruption was. And when the sulfur smell appeared in the air, they didn't suspect the impending catastrophe. When the volcano spilled out tons of lava and ash, all the residents of Santorini abandoned their homes and tried to escape, but they couldn't. The eruption and earthquake triggered a tsunami. A large wave flooded the coastal part of the island of Crete. This hit the economy of the Minoans hard and destroyed their port harbor. Then, foreigners attacked Crete and finally destroyed the developed civilization. Some historians think that Plato could have referred to the Minoan Empire when describing Atlantis. Using their example, he showed how immoral actions could destroy people.
The Azores are 9 islands in the Atlantic Ocean, sitting about a third of the way from Europe to North America. A history textbook will tell you that the Portuguese explorers discovered this beautiful archipelago in the 15th century. Until then, they were uninhabited. The islands still belong to Portugal, so there seems to be no controversy or mystery here, except for the fact that some researchers think the Azores were home to an ancient civilization from thousands of years ago. Others support the idea that the famous Atlantis itself was here. In 2010, archaeologists announced that they found some structures on the islands which looked like they were from the Stone Age. If that's true, it would mean that there was a civilization back then which was advanced enough to travel this far and settle on the remote islands. A special scientific commission studied the matter and concluded that those structures were natural rock formations or had a more modern origin. So the first settlers were supposed to have been the Portuguese. It didn't stop some enthusiastic scientists from further research. They analyzed the DNA of mice from the Azores and found that it had the same genetic characteristics as house mice from northern Europe. The little rodents couldn't have sailed this far without humans, so it looks like the first people had arrived at the Azores before the Portuguese, and the plot thickens. Dr. Felix Rodriguez, who works at the University of the Azores, is determined to find out exactly when it happened. He's studying the megalithic structures found in the Azores. Similar structures found in Western Europe and the Mediterranean date back to the Neolithic age. According to Dr. Rodriguez, the oldest findings are from 4,200 years ago. It's not clear when civilizations left them. The professor identified 7 megalithic structures in one complex as dolmens for the deceased. The cavities are all cylindrical in shape and definitely don't look like a natural formation. The material from the cavities turned out to be at least 2,500 years old. There are also some pieces of ceramics that seem to be even older. It looks like the rocks in the area had been lifted. You can see it by the small waves left by lava. It's thick and sticky, so it can't leave vertical marks. Someone must have moved the rock from its horizontal position. Another interesting finding is some stone anchors with holes found by the sea. Similar ones were used in the Mediterranean and on the Atlantic coast of Europe, dating back to 1000 and 2000 BCE. The 15th century Portuguese were advanced sailors and never used stone anchors, only metal ones. The scientists also managed to find a structure built right in the volcanic tuff. It looks somewhat similar to the ones built in the Mediterranean that are at least 2,000 years old. These structures are called columbariums and were used to store the ashes of the deceased. They also found something resembling an oven next to it, so they could be a part of one complex. There's also a basin in the middle, and it's not the only one on the island. It looks like they had a special meaning to their builders. There are channels around the construction. They connect the 4 basins, and the sun lights each of them at different times of the year. It was all carefully planned, as they were lit the brightest during winter and summer solstices and autumn and spring equinoxes. The water passed through all the basins and went directly into the sea. It could have been a purifying ritual. Now, some people are skeptical about the findings and believe they're all parts of a fortress from the 16th century. Professor Rodriguez is determined to prove it's all much older. There must have been some ancient civilization here that could have left because of the volcanoes that go crazy every 50 years. Antonietta Costa, a postdoctoral student at the University of Porto in Portugal, is also sure that the first people came to the Azores in prehistoric times. She has studied standing stones with small openings, explained as cuts for quarrying the stones. Costa believes they are part of a calendar system. She noticed that none of the slits in the rocks were aligned with the cardinal east direction. The slits closest to it are smaller than the ones facing other directions, so it can't be just a coincidence. It also looks like the slits are aligned with the solstices, and that's what makes Costa think it could be a calendar. She also thinks the inscriptions left on slabs of bedrock on the islands are much like those maps that were left on the rocks during the Stone Age in mainland Europe. Another interesting theory about the Azores is that it could have been the location of the famous Atlantis, which was lost under the sea. Since the Azores archipelago is in the middle of an ocean, it could technically be a perfect place for that. A 20th century scholar quoted Plato to prove this theory was right. The Greek philosopher suggested that Atlantis was in between the continents. The coins and sculptures supposedly found in the Azores when the Portuguese just arrived also point that there was someone else present there. And way more recently, in 2013, a sailor found a huge structure looking like a pyramid off the Azores coast. It was most likely a large submarine volcano, but it's much cooler to think it was some big deal in Atlantis, right? Peru has its own mystery. Amid the desert, you can find some eerie marks called the Nazca lines. They're known as geoglyphs and were created more than 2,000 years ago by the people of the Nazca culture. Thanks to a dry climate and strong winds in the desert, most of the Nazca lines have reached our day. To create them, Nazca people removed the top layer of the pebbles and revealed the soil beneath the ground. The color of the soil changes from reddish-brown to yellowish-gray, so the lines always look different. Most of the geoglyphs depict plants and animals. You can clearly see a monkey, a whale, a condor, a hummingbird, a spider, various flowers, trees, and other plants. There are also some geometric shapes, such as triangles, trapezoids, and spirals. Since they were discovered in the 1920s, scientists have offered different explanations for the lines. Some say that in Nazca culture, people ascribe special significance to these motifs, so they probably created these shapes for deities in the sky to see. Others believe they were a sort of astronomical calendar, and animal sketches were modeled after groups of stars. This theory was proved wrong, so the purpose of the lines remains a mystery. Another place that leaves many questions is Nimrut Mountain in Turkey. This mountain has a complex of monuments with temples and tombs. It was built by the Kingdom of Commagene, which ruled here around the 1st century BCE. There are statues of King Antiochus, 2 lions, 2 eagles, Zeus, Hercules, and Apollo. Archaeologists found the ruins of this complex at the end of the 19th century. They thought it had been built by the Assyrians. Then, some of the most famous scientists of the time came here and found an inscription in Greek. It had details about the sculptures and the names of important members of the Commagene royal family. It looked like it had been put there for future visitors. The scientists established that the statues used to be full-size figures. Changes in temperature, strong winds, snow, and the bright sun didn't leave them a chance to last in all their original glory. Plus, the complex is in an earthquake zone, so all you can see now is mostly the heads of the statues. They look incredibly complex and large for their time. The biggest question is, how did the people who lived thousands of years ago manage to create such huge sculptures on top of the mountain? It's obvious that they worked on shaping the limestone blocks up there and not on the ground. So, stay tuned. We'll keep an eye on this.
What is a boat doing in the middle of a desert? You would expect to find a seagoing vessel closer to shore. This is the question archaeologists had been asking for decades. In 1988, there was a storm near one of the most important archaeological sites in ancient Egypt. A wooden structure emerged from the sand. It was hollowed out by termites. Scientists were determined to solve its mystery. In 2000, they began excavating the site near Abydos, Abydos. An American team of experts soon discovered a boat that was 70 feet long, and it wasn't alone. In total, there were 14 boats neatly resting next to each other. It was impossible to completely dig out the boats because of their poor condition. Luckily, the wood was preserved enough to get a sample. Analyses revealed that the boats were around 5,000 years old, the oldest fleet in human history to this date. The time of their construction predates the pyramids at Giza by half a millennium. Each ship of the fleet rested in a vault that matched its dimensions. The room was roughly a third of the size of a tennis court. It had mud brick walls that featured more than 120 drawings of boats. Ancient Egyptians incised them on whitewashed walls that were excellently preserved. Scientists have known about these mysterious chambers for well over a century. 1901, 1902. A British archaeologist, Arthur Weigel, stumbled upon a strange structure west of the River Nile. His team caught a glimpse of the interior walls. Sadly, a section of the roof collapsed, so they had to call off further exploration. Researchers abandoned the site, but its location remained on the maps. The boat's position first led scientists to think that they rested on a bank of the mighty Nile. But there was a problem with this theory. Today, the river flows almost 7 miles west of Abydos. Further studies of the surrounding terrain showed the Nile didn't change its course throughout history. Also, if the boats floated near a dock, they would be in unstable positions. The 14 vessels at Abydos were perfectly parallel to each other. There was only one conclusion possible. Someone had deliberately placed them like that. They must have gone through a lot of effort. Each boat had enough room for up to 30 rowers. These vessels could really float. They weren't models, but scholars still don't know if they actually sailed any body of water in ancient Egypt. This doesn't diminish the importance of the find. Previously, archaeologists found only small-scale models. In King Tut's tomb alone, there were 35 boat models. For a long time, these figurines were the only clues as to how ancient Egyptian vessels looked like. The boat's design confirms that they were the real deal. They are the earliest surviving examples of something called built boats. Ancient people constructed primitive vessels by hollowing out large tree trunks. The alternative was reed that was tied together to form a raft. The boats at Abydos had planks tied together. This was a major breakthrough in shipbuilding. During their lifetime, the boats must have seemed impressive. Timber was a valuable commodity at the time. There was no wood in the desert. Cedar had to be imported from Lebanon. The only person who could afford such luxury was the pharaoh. Studying the area around the ancient fleet provided more answers. Scientists discovered a mud brick structure where Egyptians worshipped the pharaoh. Its approximate date of construction matches that of the wooden boats. The same bricks out of which this building was made were used to encase the fleet. At the time of their construction, the rooms they were stored in had a ceiling. That's the section that archaeologists stumbled upon in the early 20th century. Just like mummies and coffins, these marvelous ships rested inside splendid vaults. The exterior of these rooms was also impressive. The outer walls originally had a plaster of white limestone. It reflected sunlight. In the desert sun, the structure housing the boats must have shone from miles away. Ancient Egyptian builders used the same technique to cover the pyramids 500 years later. Today, their surface looks jagged, but it wasn't always like this. When they were constructed, the pyramids had a top layer of fine white limestone. Their surface was smooth and it gleamed in the sunlight. Instead of stairs, the outer layer of the pyramids was more of a sleek ramp. Archaeologists were left with one final question. Which pharaoh owned the fleet? The answer lay just a mile from the site. This is where the tomb of a pharaoh from the 5th dynasty rested, King Senwosret III. Its time and style of construction matched the ones of the chambers with boats. The very end of his rule might explain how the boats ended up in the middle of the desert. The pharaoh probably passed away in northern Egypt. Then his body was transported down the Nile to Abydos in a marvelous procession of decorated boats. The vessels were later lowered to chambers near the final resting place of their owner. This had a symbolic meaning. In the ancient Egyptians' belief system, ships played a key role. Their supreme deity was Ra. He traveled through the sky during the day in the form of the sun. At nighttime, he sailed through the netherworld in a solar boat. The pharaoh identified himself with Ra. That's why he needed boats in the afterlife. That was the only way to regenerate himself. Just as the sun rises every day above the horizon. This belief existed for thousands of years. The more famous Pharaoh Khufu also had a ship. Scientists found it in 1954 next to his pyramid at Giza. It is some 4 centuries younger than the fleet at Abydos. But Khufu's ship was almost 2 times longer. The Great Pyramid of Giza and King Tut's tomb are some of the most famous archaeological finds in Egypt. But there are many more secrets hiding beneath the endless sands of the Sahara Desert. Recently, 2020, archaeologists found a lost city there. They have labeled it as the most important discovery since King Tut's tomb, 1922. The city of Aten is some 3,000 years old. Historians hope it will give them a unique insight into the everyday life of ancient Egyptians. The famous archaeologist and Egyptologist Zahi Hawass proclaimed the site a lost golden city. Aten sits some 300 miles south of Egypt's capital, Cairo. It is close to the famous Valley of the Kings. Archaeologists first found sections of mud brick walls that spread out in all directions. They discovered complete rooms with tools of everyday life inside. The research team unearthed a bakery, a residential neighborhood, and an administrative district. They all date back to the time when the Egyptian civilization was the wealthiest in its long history. They were also the first to make objects from iron. In 1911, scientists found a set of iron beads near a village in Lower Egypt, El Girza. These are the earliest known iron artifacts. The discovery is literally out of this world. Ancient people made them by beating into shape a piece of a meteorite. The 9 beads were once part of an ornate necklace. They are now blackened and corroded, which is perfectly normal for a piece of jewelry that is over 5,000 years old. They consist of an iron-nickel alloy. Researchers were impressed by the skill of ancient jewelers who processed the beads. Their craftsmanship is more impressive when you think that they didn't know the stellar origins of the material. The Great Pyramid of Giza also has a remarkable feature. An international research group investigated the electromagnetic response of the structure to radio waves. They found that the pyramid has the ability to concentrate electromagnetic energy inside it. This occurred inside its chambers as well as under the pyramid's base. It contains an underground, unfinished chamber. It seems that the electromagnetic response is connected with the properties of limestone, the Great Pyramid's main building material. The research results might have a practical application. The way solar cells and nanosensors function could be improved by this remarkable find.
Night enveloped the desert above Heraklion. A group of archaeologists moved through the labyrinth of sunken ruins, illuminating their path with powerful flashlights. Suddenly, one of the researchers, Dr. Martin Hale, stopped in front of a temple wall. He carefully brushed away a layer of sand and discovered a strange bas-relief. A woman holding a creature with an unusually elongated head and enormous eyes. "This can't just be a stylized depiction of an infant," whispered his colleague, Alice Carter. "The Paracas skulls in Peru have similar shapes. Could this be evidence of hybrids?" The question remained unanswered, but the mystery of Heraklion continued to intrigue scientists. Theories ranged from ancient cults to contacts with extraterrestrial civilizations. However, biologists established that elongated skulls could be the result of artificial cranial deformation, a practice common in ancient times. No DNA analysis has shown traces of non-human genetics. Meanwhile, in another part of the solar system, the Viking 1 probe transmitted an image to Earth of a rock formation on Mars resembling a human face. The photograph instantly became a sensation, fueling conspiracy theories. "It's just pareidolia," astronomers stated. "The human brain is wired to recognize familiar shapes in random forms." Decades later, when NASA sent more advanced spacecraft, images confirmed that the face on Mars was merely an ordinary hill, with shadows creating the illusion of facial features. However, proponents of the ancient Martian civilization theory insist that the truth is being concealed. No less mysterious are the artifacts of the Maya civilization. Their bas-reliefs depicting beings resembling astronauts, their complex astronomical calculations, and myths of gods descending from the heavens suggest possible contact with extraterrestrials. Some researchers associate Kukulkan, the feathered serpent god, with alien beings. However, historians remind us that such imagery appears in many cultures and may carry purely symbolic meaning. In Scotland, on Arthur's Seat Hill, children stumbled upon 17 miniature wooden coffins with tiny figurines inside. The origin of these remains unresolved. Were they ritual offerings, connected to the murderers Burke and Hare, who sold their victims' bodies for medical research, or simply children's toys mistakenly perceived as something mystical? Some theories suggest they could have been a form of symbolic burial for souls who never received a proper grave. Others believe they were connected to an ancient superstition meant to ward off evil spirits. Another hypothesis suggests they were linked to an old Scottish practice of making talismans for protection against supernatural forces. The Antikythera mechanism found off the coast of Greece is another ancient enigma. This intricate device, over 2,000 years old, turned out to be an astronomical calculator ahead of its time. Studies revealed that the mechanism was used to calculate planetary movements and eclipses, proving the advanced knowledge of ancient Greek science. Many researchers now believe that similar devices might have existed, but no other examples have been discovered. Recent images from the Perseverance rover uncovered mysterious square structures on Mars. Geologists attribute them to natural crystallization and erosion processes, but UFO enthusiasts are convinced they are ruins of ancient constructions. The formations bear a striking resemblance to rectangular patterns seen in some ancient Earth structures, further fueling debates about potential past life on the Red Planet. In Germany, during excavations near Marburg Castle, students discovered a pocket sundial. The miniature device, several centuries old, amazed researchers with its precision and craftsmanship. Who owned it? Was it part of monastic heritage, used for prayers on a strict schedule? Experts believe that such sundials were rare and expensive, likely belonging to high-ranking individuals or scholars deeply engaged in astronomy and mathematics. Yet one of the most intriguing discoveries remains the Sabu disk, a 5,000-year-old artifact from Egypt. its purpose remains debated. Some believe it was a ritual object, while others think it had a technical function, possibly part of an ancient machine. Some engineers speculate that its shape suggests it could have been part of a primitive flywheel or a component of an unknown mechanism. Certain studies suggest it could have been related to liquid movement or even served as a part of a lost mechanical system. Despite extensive research, its true function remains an enigma, adding to the ongoing fascination with the technological capabilities of early civilizations. The world is full of mysteries. Every solved enigma raises new questions. Were these artifacts merely the result of human ingenuity, or evidence of contact with forces we have yet to understand? As new discoveries emerge, the past continues to challenge our understanding, reminding us that history holds secrets waiting to be uncovered.
Question for you. Do you think Atlantis could be real? It remains as one of history's greatest mysteries. The legend began with Plato, all the way back in ancient Greece. The tale of a civilization that formed and prospered before our own. Atlantis was supposedly a highly technological society, much like the Mayans. But, as the legend says, due to the people's greed, they were punished by a flood that destroyed and submerged their cities. Different theories try to guess Atlantis' location. Some say it was in the Mediterranean Sea. Some say it's beneath the Bermuda Triangle. But, as science has shown us, Atlantis may be only an allegory for humankind. Today, you'll discover several amazing underwater cities that you have never heard of. They existed indeed and are not just a myth. We're taking you on an excursion to the underwater city of Baia, which is on the coast of Italy. Known as the Las Vegas of the Roman Empire, Baia was a resort city. The Roman elite traveled there for recreation. Imagine an open-air spa. That was Baia. You can visit the submerged town by scuba diving and get close to that perfectly preserved, magnificent Roman sculpture, a true underwater wonder. You can spot the crumbled temples and buildings through glass-bottom boats. This is a moss-covered museum in Claudio's Nymphaeum. To your left, you can see a collection of classical Greek statues. Swimming down the Via Herculeana, you'll arrive at Villa Aprotio. Villas are Italian-style houses, and here you can admire their original marble floors. Notice the black and white patterns and the astounding shapes they make. Next, you'll arrive at Portus Julius. Can you see the collapsing wall structures at the bottom of the seafloor? You'll see well-preserved columns and limestone floors. Behold the ruins of the thermal baths of Lacus. The remaining multicolored mosaics are something great to see. You'll see their orange, blue, and green tiles if you get close enough. At Pisoni's Villa Pila, you'll see 25 preserved Roman pillars. Notice the arches, the frescoes nearby, and the magnitude of this well-kept treasure. The city was located over natural volcanic vents, so there were hot springs to be used at will. People went there looking to have an excellent time. And when I say people, I mean some of the great Roman emperors we learned about in school: Nero, Cicero, Caesar. But around the 8th century, the city was sacked and the luxurious town was abandoned. Slowly, the water level rose and the city started to drown. You are on a summer vacation off the coast of Greece, 4 hours outside of Athens, in the Peloponnese Peninsula on Pavlo Petri. You dust off your snorkel and head for a free dive on a bright sunny day. Sometime into the dive, you start noticing patterns on the seabed. 13 feet below the surface, the outline of familiar objects starts to appear, one by one. As you continue swimming, what looks like the outline of an entire city emerges before your eyes. You wonder, how could water have taken the whole city? Rocks are perfectly aligned into what appears to be the foundation of a building. Nicholas Fleming, a British oceanographer on vacation in Greece, was the person that discovered Pavlo Petri. He was documenting the seafloor artifacts. The team found the site filled with pots, storage vessels, and tools. A quern stone, for instance, is a tool used for grinding grains and turning them into flour. Multiple amphoras, which were found then, indicate that this settlement dated back to the Bronze Age, 5,500 years ago, when people started living in towns. The settlement is believed to have lasted for over 2,400 years. Pablo Petri is considered today the oldest submerged town yet found, and it's impressive that it wasn't a simple village. It was a vibrant port city with stone-built buildings, a marketplace, streets, and even squares. Let's continue our exploration and find secrets in other underwater cities. You are diving off the coast of the Ryukyu Islands. Pacific waters are far from smooth. There's a strong current pulling you into the deep sea. Suddenly, you see a huge structure thanks to the sunlight shining down on the seabed. At first, it looks like Machu Picchu's ruins across the globe in Peru. As you approach it, you slowly figure out its form. A pyramid-shaped structure, arches, staircases. It's something that could have easily been a palace or castle. Could this also be a sign of human activity? What you just saw is known today as the Yanaguni Monument. It also goes by the name of Japan's Atlantis. The entire monument is about the size of 5 football fields and the height of a 5-story building. Its most surprising feature is its expansive terraces that host large crowd gatherings. Explorers and scientists believe that Yanaguni dates back to 10,000 years ago. But whether it is a man-made structure or a natural formation is still under debate. For Japan's top marine geologist, Professor Masaki Kimura, Yanaguni is the heritage of a lost civilization. Kimura has dived into exploring the ruins over 100 times over the past 10 years. According to him, there are clear signs of human activity down there. The triangle pool, located on the monument's surface, is a triangle-shaped concave that is a historical symbol of water fountains in the region. There is also a giant turtle carved on the eastern side of the structure. And according to Kimura, turtles have an important cultural meaning. Several pieces of stone tools have been recovered from the site. Their estimated age dates back to 10,000 years ago. However, not all scientists are convinced of the same. For many, Yanaguni is the result of thousands of years of erosion. The fact that the monument is composed of one massive rock leads them to believe that it is not human-made. The defined edges and flat surfaces resemble a natural formation occurrence in Northern Ireland, known as Giant's Causeway. A series of interlocking basalt columns look like the ruins of a palace, but they were the result of volcanic activity in the region. Well, stay tuned for more underwater discoveries. The next stop on our voyage is one of today's most famous underwater cities that has turned into an underwater archaeological park. The city of Port Royal in Jamaica exists today only below the surface. But in 1692, it was one of the wealthiest cities in the Western Hemisphere. Port Royal was the center of the British Empire at the time, and an important trade city that attracted people from all over. It was also home to real-life pirates of the Caribbean. On the morning of June 7, 1692, the people of Port Royal met a different fate than they probably expected. The bars and restaurants beaming with life woke up shaking. People were taken out of bed with the power of a massive earthquake, estimated today at 7.5 on the Richter scale. One survivor says he saw the earth opening up and swallowing the town whole. What he said could be true, as the city was mainly built over sand. The ground sucked buildings, roads, and everyone above. Geysers erupted, and finally, waves as big as 10-story-high buildings hit the city. About 33 acres of the city disappeared underwater, and amazingly, most of its 17th century remains lie in good condition under 40 feet of water. In the ruins, archaeologists have found taverns, storage rooms, kitchens, and recreational buildings used for diverse purposes. You can see a grand lion statue, a submerged bridge, and many picturesque arches. Now, do you fancy a trip to India? Just outside its coast lies another sunken marvel. A site known as the Lost City of Cambay is located on the Gulf of a similar name. It remained hidden until 2001, when the National Institute of Ocean Technology did a routine water assessment. With sonar technology, which sends a wave of sound to the bottom of the sea, they found something far beneath the surface. Images showed well-defined geometric shapes spread along a 5-mile stretch. The remains found dated to more than 9,500 years ago, meaning that this civilization was lost at around the end of the Ice Age. Debris recovered from the site included construction material, pottery, beads, sculptures, and even bones. Scientists argue whether these artifacts are indeed from the site. But if they truly are, then the lost city of Cambay would be the oldest civilization in the world.
On October 30th, 1759, the inhabitants of the Middle East were jolted awake by an earthquake. Cracks appeared in the walls of their homes, roofs began to crumble. People ran out of their homes and gathered in open areas. But because of strong shocks, they kept losing their footing and falling. A month later, there was another earthquake, but it turned out to be even stronger. Trees broke, houses collapsed, deep cracks appeared in the ground. The disaster lasted for 2 minutes. Oases, roads, and cities were destroyed. Incredibly, Baalbek's ancient buildings withstood earthquakes. Some historians state that this majestic and mysterious place was built during the Roman Empire, but many researchers disagree. Whatever the truth is, the city is one of the main archaeological phenomena of humankind. The most amazing building of Baalbek is the Temple of Jupiter. The inhabitants of the Roman Empire believed that Jupiter held power over lightning and thunder. The building looked like a platform with 54 columns. A massive roof rested on these columns. Today, you can only see 6 70-foot-high columns. Each of them consists of 3 sections and resembles a pencil. The cores of these pencils were made of lead. This made the columns exceptionally strong. Each of these pieces of stone weighed an incredible 80 tons. That's the weight of 35 Ford Explorer SUVs. Look, this is the largest block in the Great Pyramid of Giza. But compared to the blocks from Baalbek, it doesn't even look that impressive. The foundation under the Temple of Jupiter was preserved. That's how specialists figured out it consisted of about 25 monolithic stones, weighing 450 tons each. It means that the blocks from Baalbek weigh almost 4 times more than the blocks from Egypt. There are 3 more enormous limestone blocks in the foundation. They weigh 800 tons each. This is more than twice the weight of a Boeing 747 plane. Ancient builders must have had a hard time carving such giants from a piece of stone. And after that, they also had to pull them to the construction site and lift them to a significant height. Repeating these logistics would probably turn out to be a nightmare for present-day builders. To do this amount of work, they would need modern equipment. But Baalbek's constructors didn't have trucks, cranes with circular saws, or electricity. How did the builders of the past manage to do this? Scientists have a theory that includes ropes, winches, and lever systems. Naturally, the engineers of the past made all the gadgets from wood. Around 3,000 feet away from the ruins of the temple complex, there's a quarry. Archaeologists suppose that's where the stones for the construction were cut. They found a block of limestone there. It seemed to be too large, even for this incredible place. The monolith got called the Stone of the South. It was 65 feet long and 13 feet wide. The ancient builders didn't have time to completely separate it from its mother rock. A group of scientists from Austria estimated that this piece of limestone weighed more than 1,000 tons. That's like 3 Boeing aircraft or 160 African elephants. There was another surprise awaiting the archaeologists near the Stone of the South. It was the second monolith that weighed more than 1,200 tons. But the ancient builders didn't stop at that. They continued to work. In 2014, in the same quarry, German archaeologists unearthed a block that weighed 1,650 tons. No one has figured out yet why people of the past needed a piece of stone that weighed as much as 125 school buses. It's also unclear how they were going to move this giant and why they didn't finish the job. In any case, this third monolith is the largest processed piece of stone in human history. There are more questions than answers. Some researchers believe that people of the past had high-tech equipment. Others don't think so, but are eager to understand how the builders managed to move those stones. There's a huge number of ancient buildings and artifacts on the planet. Lots of them make researchers scratch their heads. Near the Pyramid of Djoser in Egypt, archaeologists have found a network of tunnels. This place is called Serapium. It contains 24 sarcophagi weighing from 70 to 100 tons. The giant boxes are carved from a single piece of granite and covered with heavy lids. The sarcophagi are perfectly symmetrical. To the touch, their walls are as smooth as glass. Even with the current level of technology, this is very difficult to do. But the ancient Egyptians managed this feat. The Lycurgus cup is a priceless artifact and example of ancient nanotechnology. It's made of glass that can change its color. If you put a source of light in front of the cup, it turns green. If the light is behind the goblet, it becomes deep red. In this case, the figure of Greek king Lycurgus turns pale purple. Scientists understood how this color change worked only at the end of the 20th century. Through microscopes, they saw nanoparticles of silver, gold, and copper. They had been added to the glass matrix. Thanks to this, you can observe a color change called dichroism. Interestingly, the gold and silver were grounded into a fine dust. It's almost impossible to do this by accident. Most likely, the ancient experts knew for sure what they were doing. Bolivia has a curious place called Puma Punku. It looks as if an ancient giant played there with an enormous construction set. And after the game, they forgot to put the pieces back into the box. But there are no giants, and the huge stone blocks were carved by ancient builders over 1,500 years ago. Some of the rocks weigh 100 tons. The blocks were brought to an altitude of almost 13,000 feet above sea level from the quarry 60 miles away from the construction site. There's no forest in that area. This means the builders couldn't use trees to make wooden rollers. The monument belongs to the Inca civilization. Scientists are sure they didn't know anything about wheels. In 1992, the inhabitants of a Chinese village decided to drain a pond. Their ancestors had been using it to wash clothes and catch fish for hundreds of years. They kept pumping the water out for 17 days. At the bottom of the reservoir, they made an unexpected discovery. The villagers saw an entrance to a cave going down to a depth of 100 feet. The incredible find was named the Longyu Caves. Unknown builders carved out 320,000 square feet of galleries. There are separate rooms, bridges, pools, and columns that support the ceiling. The walls of the cave are covered with strange carved lines and patterns. Scientists haven't found any information about who built the caves and why they did it. The construction technology also remains a mystery. Antonio Stradivari lived in Italy in the 18th century. He created musical instruments. More than 600 of his works have survived to this day. 500 of them are violins. One of the instruments was sold at auction for $16 million. The violins made by this master sound clear and deep. Researchers can't understand why Stradivarius instruments produce such unique sounds. Perhaps it's all about the varnish the master used to cover the violins. The answer may also lie in the wood the instruments are made of. In those days, Europe had a cold climate. Because of this, the wood became denser, and the instruments made of it sounded especially pleasing to the ear. In the Indian city of Delhi, there's a 23-foot high pole. It weighs 6.5 tons and is made of 98% wrought iron. The 1,600-year-old pillar has no signs of rust or decay. Scientists believe that the monument is so well preserved thanks to the dry weather and the chemical composition of the metal. It might be resistant to corrosion. And still, researchers don't know how the blacksmiths managed to make an iron pillar that's not afraid of rust. It seems like a tough feat, even for modern metallurgists. The Al-Nasla rock is divided into two parts by a perfectly straight slit. Each boulder stands on a small pedestal. Some people believe this is the evidence of ancient laser technology. But geologists think the split happened due to the ground shifting or natural vibrations that occurred under the rock. This process led to the appearance of the crack. It had been deepening for thousands of years, and gradually, the natural monument took the form you can see today.
1,000 years ago, near modern-day St. Louis, Missouri, there was a vibrant, bustling city called Cahokia. It was a Native American city, the largest and most influential one in Mississippian culture. At its peak, around 1050 BCE, Cahokia was home to as many as 30,000 people, making it larger than Paris at the time. But what's interesting is that Cahokia didn't have any big marketplace. Usually trade was the backbone of any big city, yet this one stood out for archaeologists. That's because Cahokia wasn't about commerce. It was about culture, community, and parties. The people who lived there threw massive parties that would last for days. The city's grandest feature was its 50-acre plaza, surrounded by amazing earthen pyramids. This massive space could hold over 10,000 people. Imagine them all gathering there for festivities, dancing, drinking coffees and teas, feasting on deer, and betting on sports. The events were super lively. Cahokians would wear awesome costumes, style their hair in interesting ways, and decorate their bodies with tattoos. Athletes were playing a game called chunky, where they hurled spears at a rolling stone disc, competing to get as close as possible. The roar of the crowd filled the air, and performers showed off their skills. These celebrations were so wild, they left traces in history. After the parties ended, Cahokians cleaned up by tossing leftovers into pits. Archaeologists have uncovered these waste pits, and they were filled with food remains and pottery. One pit alone contained the remains of 2,000 deer, and that's from a single event. They also found traces of yaupon holly, a caffeinated plant that was traded from hundreds of miles away. This just shows how much effort and thought Cahokians put in their celebrations. Would you like to live in a city like this? But aside from all the fun and games, Cahokia was also deeply complex and spiritual. The city was built on a landscape that mixed dry land with swampy patches. Many people believe that this symbolized the connection between the world of the living and the dead. The people of Cahokia saw their city as a bridge between these two realms. They built earthen mounds, both for ceremonies and rituals, and as construction support. These mounds rose from the swampy areas. Meanwhile, people settled in the drier spots. Elevated pathways connected these neighborhoods, creating a physical link between life and death. Isn't it sad that some ancient metropolises that rival modern cities in scale just disappeared? Cahokia's story came to a quiet end around 1350 CE, when the city was abandoned, all due to changes in environments and weather, floods, and other problems. But the influence of Cahokia was so big, it spread to distant places. Some of their traditions, like chunky and yaupon tea, have survived in native communities to this day. Today, Cahokia is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it's not the only megacity we lost. About 5,000 years ago, people in the Indus Valley built some of the world's first cities. Mohenjo-Daro was an ancient city in what is now Pakistan. The city was built around 2500 BCE, and back then, it was a thriving hub of the Indus civilization. Sure, it was much smaller than modern cities, but it was quite huge at the time, around 40,000 inhabitants. It looks like the locals were crazily strict and disciplined people. The city's planning and organization were incredible. It was laid out in a grid pattern. Streets and important buildings aligned along the north-south axis, probably to match the movement of the sun and moon. They also built one of the most advanced systems for water and waste management of their time. The city had about 700 wells. Nearly every house had its own. Most homes also had private bathrooms with drainages and even underground sewers. This shows how skilled these people were at staying clean. And with all this discipline, it looks like there were no kings, queens, or even a central government. They could still have some authority, like local elites or elected officials, just not a classic strict monarchy or religion. Instead, people there cared about simplicity and order. They basically managed themselves, having standardized ways of doing things, from the way tools and potteries were made to how they traded. Which is why, unlike many other cities, Mohenjo-Daro didn't have grand palaces, temples, or monuments. Instead, they had public areas known as citadels. People gathered at citadels for rituals, meetings, and storage of grain. And it seems like this way of life worked perfectly. Scientists found some seals and weights, which means the economy was well regulated. Archaeologists found some intricate artifacts like ivory, lapis lazuli, carnelian beads, and gold jewelry. Another famous find is the small bronze statue known as the Dancing Girl, which was discovered in 1926. Mohenjo-Daro wasn't poor at all. And they also pulled off some awesome buildings. Staying clean was clearly way more important to them than displays of wealth or power. So they created the Great Bath, one of the most famous structures in the city. It's a large, watertight pool built with baked bricks, perched on a mound of earth, being almost a religious place, the closest thing they had to a temple. Meanwhile, the city itself was built on a series of mounds. They grew taller over the centuries as people added new houses and structures. Why did the city fail? No one really knows. There's something mysterious about the sculptures archaeologists found. Many of them seemed intentionally broken. This means the city's later inhabitants, maybe invaders or something, destroyed them for some reason. Some scientists think that the Indus River may have shifted course, disrupting agriculture and trade. But there's no evidence of a flood or any big event like this. It just seems like, over time, the entire Indus civilization just gradually faded away. By 1900 BCE, the culture had shifted and didn't leave much behind. Let me tell you now about the ancient city of Kos, which is located where the modern town of Kos now stands in Greece. Imagine arriving by sea, and the first thing that hits you is the sheer grandeur of its agora, this massive public square built with stones in different colors, laid out on terraces that rise above you. It was one of the biggest in the ancient world, and it made a great impression on anyone approaching the city. This place has a rich history dating back to around 2300 to 2200 BCE. A long time ago, local folk gathered up from different parts of the island to form a new city in the northeast. People have lived there since the Bronze Age, and over time, it became a super important center of culture and trade. And no wonder, since it's right near a natural harbor. The harbor was sheltered by two breakwaters, and people built some of the most important religious sites there, including the sanctuaries of Aphrodite and Hercules. Kos wasn't just beautiful, though. It had some brilliant design. The whole city was laid out in a neat grid, with streets crossing each other at perfect right angles, literally looking almost like a modern city. Thanks to this, moving around was super easy, and the blocks, or insulae, were big enough to fit several large houses. Kos remained largely unchanged until the 6th century CE. Over time, it started gradually shrinking in size, confined within the walls of what is now the Chora neighborhood. Meanwhile, Palmyra was an ancient city built around a beautiful oasis sometime around the 3rd millennium BCE. Originally known as Tadmor, this city flourished as a major stop on the Silk Road, linking the Near East with Asia. It was a thriving center of trade and culture. They had a marketplace, assembly buildings, grand gates. In other words, this place was bustling with life. The city has been through many hands throughout its history, from the Byzantine to Arab caliphates, which is probably why it had some awesome architecture. An interesting blend of Greco-Roman, Persian, and Arabic vibes. The Temple of Bel, the Great Colonnade, and a Roman-style theater. But, like all the others, it decayed over time. Palmyra's importance faded, and by the early 1400s, it had been largely destroyed. But at least its ruins remained. Right now, they're a UNESCO World Heritage Site. You plan to spend your summer vacation in Africa. The final destination is the Sahara Desert. It's located in northern Africa, stretching from the Atlantic Ocean to the Red Sea. You're excited to ride camels and learn about the region's rich cultures. You hop on an extensively long flight, and finally, you are here. You find yourself in the world's biggest hot desert. Can you believe it's 3 million square miles? You're ready for your first adventure after drinking liters of ice-cold water. The guide gives you a choice. You can spend 2 weeks visiting a collection of oases, or you can help them solve an ongoing local mystery. Deep into the desert, near this Algerian town, lies a mystery begging to be solved. A collection of huge, spotted circles in the sand. There are dozens of them, stretching for miles in a straight line. The circles were first identified via Google Earth images several years ago. People have debated them for years, but no one seems to know the answer. The strange thing is that they are so many miles away from any towns, roads, or human activity. The quickest way to discover the truth behind the circles is asking questions. You grab your notebook and set out to talk to locals. Everyone is helpful in this scenario: geographers, anthropologists, elders, and historians. The first person you talk to is a map expert. You need to understand if those circles were authentic or a satellite glitch. You end up interviewing the people who take Google Earth satellite pictures. The circles are really there. They appear in multiple pictures from many years. Then, let's understand why they are there in the first place. After 2 days of interviews, you have your first lead. The circles could be the result of oil activity. Experts explained why this would make sense. Algeria is a rich area for natural resources, so this would be a sensible guess. Usually, to find out if there is anything worth extracting, companies would undertake seismic surveys. Seismic surveys are a way of analyzing the Earth's surface by sending shock waves into the ground. Depending on how these waves bounce back, you'll know what is located there. A special vehicle could have marked the soil that way. So, did we unravel the mystery? Not quite so. As you know, the Sahara Desert is one of the driest areas on the planet. The average high temperatures in summer are over 104 degrees Fahrenheit. To survive there, people need to find ways of accessing water. So, these circles could be a kind of ruin or leftovers from ancient water wells. Again, I'd say this is a sensible guess. Ready for some fact-checking? Some anthropologists agree that these circles could be ancient fogueras. Foguera is the name of a 2,500-year-old style of irrigation system, usually found in northern Africa. It is also known as a qanat in other places in northern Africa. Locals would dig a deep well at an elevated point, deep enough to tap into underground water. They would then dig parallel shafts at regular distances. Then they would dig an underground channel that connected the city to the well. Solely with the help of gravity, water would run from the well to the city. This traditional technology provided water for crops, livestock, and humans. Now, let's say these wells made human-made oases possible. Even the closest municipality name was an indication that this could be true. The name Fogueret Essaouira is actually named after Foguerets, these ancient wells. Now, this lead was proving to be very accurate. You decide to travel over there to see for yourself. You take a local bus, sit back, and enjoy the ride. The landscape in northern Algeria is filled with ancient-looking towns. You even see ruins of wells along the way, on the outskirts of smaller cities. Opening Google's satellite images, you can see the qanat's markings on the ground, a series of holes running down several miles. But as soon as you arrive, you find out you were wrong. Dale Lightfoot, one of the world's leading experts on qanats, said that the circles were definitely not qanats. Even the satellite images confirm this difference. Uh-oh, we were so close. Apparently, qanats or fogueras would not run down a straight line. They wouldn't be shaped like circles. Another clue that this wasn't the case was that there were no towns at the end. The circles were really far away from any human activity, and qanats were explicitly built to provide water for human settlements. Well, it sure was a good try. You almost gave up on this mystery when you decided to take one more field trip. It was days of preparation, pick up cars, food, equipment, all so that the mystery of the Sahara circles could be unraveled. On the first day, you drove over 99 miles into the desert. You were always curious to see what this part of the world looked like. Over there, you see nothing but mustard yellow dunes. The night sky is pretty decent though. You can see the entire Milky Way with your own eyes. You set up camp and sleep under a canopy of stars. The next day, tension grows. There's no cell reception. Oh dear. But thankfully, you added the coordinates of the circles to your Google map. And surprise, the offline mode works out there. You follow the coordinates, but it leads you astray. You start to get nervous, thinking this was all in vain. But you and the team get into the car and drive a few more miles past the coordinates on your phone. After a very bumpy ride, you can't believe your eyes. There it is, an enormous crater dug on the sand, surrounded by 12 smaller holes. From up high, it looks like a clock, without the pointers, of course. On the ground, they're very faint, so faint you almost miss them. Searching the area, you notice all the holes had something similar, metal wires, thin wires that you can pull from the ground. They're buried deep, so you start digging. An object starts to reveal itself. Uh-oh, it looks like old dynamite. This certainly surprises you. Better stop digging to avoid any accidents. At the end of the survey, you feel satisfied, but still curious. What could all this dynamite mean? And who put it there? What comes next is the turning point of your adventure. Walking back to the car, you see something shining on the ground. You approach the item with curiosity. It's round and rusty and looks like a sardine can. What's that doing here? Could this give you more clues about the circle's mystery? Just in case, you pick it up and put it in the car. Back in the city, the puzzle pieces start to reveal the story behind the Sahara circles. You bring photos and the sardine can and show them to local experts. They analyze your material and give you an intriguing verdict. As it turns out, guess number 1 was the closest one to the truth. So, what happened to the first guess? Why do we need to keep digging deeper? Well, because it was only half right. The Sahara circles are not a historical footprint of seismic surveying. Back when the circles were made, this technology didn't even exist. But they sure are related to oil exploration. The dynamite-filled holes were an old method for oil searching. The circles are the leftovers of surveyors looking for resources underground. And the sardine cans? Well, they were left by the workers who held explosion works. You gotta eat, right? According to the model of the can, this happened more or less around the 1950s and 1960s. So these circles aren't even that ancient. More like modern ones, if you ask me. Well. Hope you are glad you tagged along and helped unravel this mystery. See you in the next mystery-solving adventure.
We all know some iconic symbols. The Statue of Liberty screams USA. The Eiffel Tower represents Paris. And this mask? Undoubtedly, it's Tutankhamun's, right? Sometimes it feels like historians have squeezed every last drop out of the King Tut story. But guess what? The most obvious details often slip right under our noses. Like the fact that this famous mask didn't actually belong to him, nor was it ever meant for him. Stick with me for the details. Can we get a close-up of that mask? Thanks. See those holes? Yep, they're for earrings. And no, it's not that they had anything against jewelry. But back in ancient Egypt, earrings were typically worn by high-status women or kids. Now, if you know your history, you might say, but Tut was a boy king, wasn't he? You're spot on. He began his reign at just 9 years old. Sadly, that didn't last long as he passed away at a very young age. So when he was 9, he might have worn earrings, but he probably took them off when he hit that no earrings age. Sounds reasonable, right? Actually, not quite. That would have been pretty strange since nobody expected him to pass away young. Certainly not at 9. So no one was preparing a kid's mask for a burial. It's this untimely demise that suggests that the mask used was simply the best option available when Tut passed away. There are more clues pointing to the idea that the mask was found in a hurry. Let's think about this. Even though Tut was mummified and his body could wait a bit, his loved ones wanted him to reach the afterlife ASAP. Some experts even believe the paint in the tomb was still wet when it was sealed. But look at his mask. It's a masterpiece. There's no way it was made in a rush. It's way more elaborate than other simpler cartonnage pieces. The renowned mask of King Tut stands 21 inches tall, adorned with precious stones, and features a golden beard that weighs 5.5 pounds, making the entire mask 22.5 pounds. Okay, I'm a bit confused here. So it seems like it was probably a kid's mask, but it had a beard? I've never seen a 9-year-old with a goatee, and I'm guessing you haven't either. Just think about it. A grown man's face compared to a kid's face. Fun fact for you, our faces pretty much stopped growing at the age of 16, so by 19, Tut would have definitely had the face of an adult man. Can you imagine trying to fit a relatively small kid's mask on a grown man? That would have been super embarrassing, and no one would have let that happen. Right, let's dismiss the kid's theory. Now the second option, if you remember, is that the mask could have originally belonged to a woman. This is where the beard theory comes into play. Some researchers believe the beard might have been added later on. Here's another twist. What if the mask was actually made for Nefertiti herself, who ended up maskless? In this case, there are two discoveries. Two birds with one stone. For now, it sounds like a conspiracy theory, I know. But let's give it a shot and delve deeper into the details. So, Tut passed away in around 1323 BCE, probably due to malaria. He had other health issues too, like when he broke his leg, and records suggest he wasn't in the best shape. As for Nefertiti, we have no solid data about her demise. Plus, nobody knows exactly when or where she was buried. The supposed year when she passed away is around 1330 BCE, but she could have lived longer, and the mask was intended and prepared for her. Or maybe they just took her mask right from the burial chamber. After all, they were family. Well, sort of. She was said to be his stepmom, having been married to Akhenaten, who was likely Tut's father. But this is not 100% accurate. Some scientists doubt it. Ah, these ancient Egyptian families. It's hard to keep track of who's who. I know, you're not yet convinced that Tut wore a lady's mask. Let me share one more theory with you. Meet Howard Carter, the enthusiastic archaeologist who discovered Tutankhamun's tomb. It was located in the Valley of Kings outside Luxor, and, to everyone's surprise, was nearly intact. When he entered, he noticed something odd. This didn't feel like a pharaoh's burial chamber. It was classy and all, but it had a vibe that suggested it was made for a woman. Typically, Egyptian pharaohs had larger tombs that suited them better, and even more strangely, it was oriented to the right of the entrance. This didn't add up. That orientation was typical for female chambers, which Egyptian queens used. Another red flag was that the chamber appeared to have been built in stages, and all the artifacts, around 2,000 of them, seemed hastily placed there. Even more curious, they looked like they were meant for other royals. Carter discovered this burial site in 1922, but it remained a mystery as to why it was so bizarre. Almost a century later, Nicholas Reeves thought he may have solved the puzzle. He claimed that King Tut might not have been the original resident of the tomb. Instead, he suggested that the undisturbed resting place of the legendary Queen Nefertiti could be hidden behind the walls of the boy king's burial chamber. Nicholas studied high-resolution photos for months, meticulously examining every pixel. One day, he focused on detailed scans that revealed the texture of the tomb's walls beneath layers of paint. He spotted what he believed to be outlines of two doorways that had been blocked and plastered over to hide them from view. The more he looked, the more it seemed real. Could it be a tomb within a tomb? Nicholas theorized there was a hidden storeroom behind the western wall of King Tut's tomb, and his chamber might just be the outermost section of a larger corridor-style network of rooms. It all sounds fancy, but sorry to break it to you. Reeves' theory was debunked. To find out if he was onto something, experts had to use ground-penetrating radar to see the unseen. Reeves' idea was that if there were gaps, it could indicate the presence of additional rooms. And at first, in 2015, one expert even thought he had found a hidden room. But the glory didn't last for long. A year later, after double-checking, it turned out there were no hidden doorways. By the way, Nefertiti isn't the only legendary woman from Egypt whose burial site remains a captivating mystery. There's a cool legend about Cleopatra that you might enjoy. It's said that she once declared, "No man will ever find my tomb." Kind of fitting, right? After all, the person who's come closest to uncovering her final resting place is a woman. Fast forward a few millennia after she passed away, and while no man has located it, archaeologist Kathleen Martinez believes she might have cracked the code. She's been on the quest for Cleopatra VII's tomb for nearly 20 years, and recently discovered a bust that she thinks represents the famous queen. However, not everyone is on board with her claim. Some experts argue that the bust doesn't resemble Cleopatra at all. Alongside this intriguing marble statue, Martinez's team also unearthed 337 coins, some of which, less controversially, feature Cleopatra's likeness. But the real part is that it's still not officially confirmed. There's no doubt about the existence of the small bust. It's carved from white marble, fits in one hand, and shows a woman wearing a royal crown, according to a translated statement from the Egyptian Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities. The big question, though, is who it actually depicts. While Martinez insists this statue is a representation of Queen Cleopatra VII, many other archaeologists argue that the facial features don't match, suggesting it likely belongs to a princess instead. Sorry, I can't resist the temptation of breaking the magic for a moment. Some folks believe that the whole idea of "no man will find my tomb" is misunderstood. Even if she did say it, what she probably meant was "no living soul," and it wasn't about gender at all. It can as well be just a beautiful legend. Toodaloo!
Aliens have invaded Earth and they are not here for friendly interaction. It all begins with the detection of an extraterrestrial signal by the SETI network. This isn't just random space noise. This is a clear sign of an alien civilization. Once the information reaches world governments, rumors start circulating that aliens are on their way to Earth. The US, Russia, and China are the first to learn of the threat, but all governments try to keep the news secret, knowing that widespread panic could lead to catastrophic consequences. At first, nothing happens. Days turn into weeks, and skeptics begin to mock the very idea of an invasion. News channels call it a hoax, while conspiracy theorists claim it's a government distraction. People continue their daily routines, unaware that something is already approaching at an unimaginable speed. Then, without warning, they arrive. Their ships break through the atmosphere, not in a slow cinematic descent, but in an instantaneous burst of speed, defying human understanding of physics. The first crafts land in major cities across the globe: New York, Moscow, Beijing, London, Tokyo. Within hours, the entire planet is covered in their presence. Authorities still don't know who these beings are or what they want. Are they destructive creatures seeking Earth's resources? Or perhaps they want to expand their empire? Another theory emerges. Maybe these invaders are artificial intelligence created for space exploration, no longer dependent on planet conditions for survival. Attempts to communicate prove futile. Linguists, AI systems, and mathematicians fail to decipher their signals. Then comes the first attack. In one swift moment, a military base in Nevada is wiped off the map, leaving only a perfectly circular crater. The world realizes that this is not a peaceful encounter. The aliens begin their offensive, and it becomes clear that they are not here for diplomacy. Earth, rich in minerals, water, and other valuable resources, is an ideal target. Their technology far surpasses ours. Despite our best efforts to resist, our military stands no chance against their lasers, nanotech, and antimatter bombs. Even the United States, with its trillion-dollar military budget, can't match the alien technology. As they destroy key military bases and power infrastructure, the world is plunged into darkness and chaos. World powers begin to cooperate, but nuclear weapons are considered a last resort, knowing that using them could doom the planet. With cities in ruin and society unraveling, millions of civilians are forced to flee to remote areas, hoping to survive. Meanwhile, scientists scramble to understand alien technology, hoping to find ways to protect Earth or develop vaccines against possible biological threats. the global communication network is broken, and humanity is on the brink of collapse. The aliens continue their systematic destruction of Earth's defenses. Satellites are taken out, cutting off global surveillance. Drones and fighter jets fall from the sky like birds caught in a storm. Entire armies are reduced to ash in seconds. Panic spreads. Governments collapse. The world's leaders either go into hiding or perish in the initial wave of destruction. Civilization, as it was known, is no more. As time passes, the alien technology continues to overpower us. Our military forces are crushed, and our only hope now lies in guerrilla warfare by civilians. The United States, with its high number of privately owned firearms, may have a better chance than other nations, but it's still unlikely that we can withstand the alien onslaught. Small resistance groups form in hidden bunkers, underground tunnels, and abandoned cities. They communicate through salvaged radios, sharing whatever knowledge they have about the invaders. Some manage to take down individual alien soldiers, but their victories are short-lived. The aliens adapt quickly, learning from human tactics, neutralizing any newfound weaknesses. However, there's another possibility. Maybe the aliens aren't here to destroy us. There's a theory that such an advanced civilization might have evolved to be peaceful, having long overcome the destructive tendencies that lead to war. Another theory suggests that aliens might not need Earth's resources, as space is abundant with energy and rare minerals. Alternatively, they might just be studying us, like creatures in a zoo, observing our progress without interference. But reality sets in once more. The aliens proceed to the next stage of their plan, terraforming Earth. This could involve altering the atmosphere by releasing gases like methane or ammonia, slowly making the planet inhospitable for humans. They may also manipulate the oceans, changing their acidity or salinity, which would destroy marine life. To further reshape Earth, the aliens activate dormant volcanoes and trigger earthquakes around the globe, either to alter the planet's environment to their liking or to access resources more easily. As Earth becomes increasingly unstable, the aliens complete their conquest, and humanity's numbers dwindle. Those who remain are used for genetic experiments or research. Our bodies, brains, and memories might be studied, or we could be wiped out altogether in a matter of days. Earth would be left a barren, lifeless rock drifting through space. However, perhaps the aliens aren't as hostile as we think. Maybe they don't want to conquer us, but instead just want to observe us, like we study animals in a zoo. Maybe, over time, they would want to cooperate with humanity and help us grow. Or perhaps, this is just the beginning of a new era for Earth.
It's 1898, and you're taking part in excavations in Sahara. This place, not far away from Cairo, is full of ancient tombs and pyramids. You're in your Indiana Jones mood and hope to find something really phenomenal to become famous. Gold, manuscripts, treasure maps, mummies of famous pharaohs. Wait, a wooden bird? You're really disappointed as it looks like a regular toy. An old one, but still. Little do you know that years later, someone would propose that your bird was actually an ancient monoplane. So the artifact, nicknamed the Sahara bird, is made of a sycamore tree. The birdie has a wingspan of just 7 inches and weighs around 40 grams. A perfect original souvenir from Egypt, I would say. It's over 2,000 years old and looks pretty plain, without any carvings of feathers or other intricate ornaments. It has a beak and eyes, though, which makes our find look like a hawk, the emblem of the deity Horus. Its tail is rather unusual as it's squared, looks weirdly upright, and it seems like the sunken part of it was the place for a now missing piece. Humans love solving a good mystery, so there have been several attempts to explain the use of the birdie. First, quite simply, is that it was a ceremonial object. The second idea is that it was a toy for a child from some well-off family. It could have been some sort of boomerang, which was a popular concept in ancient Egypt. Then there was a theory that the bird had been used as a weather vane. But this one has been debunked as the figure doesn't have any holes or markings, except for the one made at the museum in Cairo to fix the exhibit on a stick. so there was no way to hang it in the past. Almost a century after the bird was found, Egyptologist Dr. Khalil Masiha proposed a new theory that it could have been a model of a monoplane. He believed the bird was missing a horizontal tailplane. Otherwise, it had its wings set at a right angle, similar to that of modern planes. It could have worked to generate the aerodynamic lift necessary for flights. Dr. Masiha also claimed that it was common at that time to place miniature models of technological inventions in tombs. So, did the ancient Egyptians really invent the plane in 200 BCE? That would make the Wright brothers, who are considered the inventors of aviation, really upset. They made one of their first flights only in 1903. There's just one way to know for sure, and that is to test the model. But you know, the ancient museum in Cairo would unlikely let one of their cherished exhibits fly around like a toy. That's why glider designer Martin Gregory built a similar model, this time of balsa wood, and concluded that even with the missing tailplane, the plane wasn't much of a flyer. Case solved? Not really. This didn't sound convincing enough to the History Channel, so they invited an aerodynamics expert to build another replica of the bird. He tested it in weather conditions similar to those in Egypt and was impressed with the little plane's abilities. So, if they did invent the prototype of a plane back in the times of pharaohs, it would be a good example of an oupart. That's an out-of-place artifact, an object that's way ahead of its time in terms of technology or history. And the Sahara bird isn't the only example of such a revolutionary concept. In 1901, a group of divers retrieved the Antikythera mechanism from an underwater shipwreck near the Greek island of Antikythera. It's been dubbed the world's first analog computer, and it's currently dated around 100 BCE. The bronze mechanism could tell the position of the sun, moon, planets, and stars, as well as the lunar phase, the dates of upcoming solar eclipses, and even the speed at which the moon moves through the sky. No one's sure who used it and how or where it was made. But it's obvious that it's extremely precise and way too advanced for its time. The first flushing toilets in the world were invented in the middle of the 20th century. Just kidding. The ancient Minoans on the Mediterranean island of Crete and the Indus Valley civilization both came up with this brilliant invention at the same time, around 4,000 years ago. The plumbing and sanitation were so well done that no one managed to design anything better until 2,000 years later. One ancient Minoan lavatory was discovered at the Palace of Knossos. It looks like it had a wooden seat set over a tunnel that directed water from a rooftop reservoir to an underground sewer. Other varieties got water from jugs. Only the super rich people could afford all this glory. So if you wanted to shop for real estate back then, the flushing toilet would be a telltale sign you were in the rich neighborhood. Automated doors became a cool, seemingly new invention back in 1931. But the technology behind them is actually much older. Think the 1st century CE old. Mathematician and engineer Heron of Alexandria came up with a hydraulic system to open and close temple doors. To bring it into action, you need to light a fire to produce heat. There was a brass pot under the fire, half filled with water. The inventor connected the brass pot to containers that acted as weights. When the fire was burning, the water moved into the containers. They went down and pulled the ropes. It was nothing like a supermarket door that opens in front of you before you even have time to think. Heron's door took hours to open, and there was no way to stop the process. That's why they only opened the doors once a day before people entered the temple, to add some mysticism at the temple during ceremonies. Spooky. Looks like the first ever battery was invented in Baghdad around 2,000 years ago. A German archaeologist found this oval-shaped clay jar in 1938. scientists are still not sure what purpose it served and who exactly invented it. There is a theory that it was used for electroplating objects with precious metals. When they filled it with a weak acid like vinegar, the battery produced around 1 volt of electricity. Another theory says it was a vessel for sacred scrolls. Would you like to buy contact lenses designed by Leonardo da Vinci himself? In 1508, he invented a glass lens with a funnel on one side. You were supposed to wear it with water inside to improve your vision. Sounds a bit uncomfortable, doesn't it? So, around a century later, French scientist René Descartes decided to improve the idea and make the cornea contact the future lenses. Contacts because they contact your eyes, get it? The glass tube with liquid did help improve vision, but blinking was sadly impossible. 2.5 centuries later, new technologies in the glass industry let scientists design contacts that would fit in the eye and even let the wearer blink. Thanks, guys! Still, those lenses were made of heavy blown glass and didn't let the eye breathe. About 50 years later, contacts became plastic, lightweight, unbreakable, and scratch-resistant, but still covering the entire eye. And then, in 1948, an English optical technician accidentally sanded down a plastic lens and figured out they'd still be in place even if they covered only the cornea. Imagine you're living in 19th century London and need to send a message to New York. It would have taken about 10 days to get there by ship. So when delivery time went from days to hours in 1858, it was a true sensation. The first message was sent by Queen Victoria herself. It was all made possible thanks to the transatlantic telegraph cable, running under the ocean. Sadly, the new cool invention only lasted a few weeks. It took years to bring it back to life.
Imagine this. Long ago, in the depths of prehistory, aliens visited Earth. Yep, that's right. According to ancient astronaut believers, intelligent extraterrestrial beings made contact with humans thousands of years ago. And not only that, those alien visitors influenced the development of our cultures, religions, technologies, and maybe even our biology. All those divine beings in many ancient religions? Well, some say they were actually aliens with fancy tech, mistaken for deities by early humans. The pyramids, Stonehenge, Easter Island statues, all alien handiwork. At least that's what they claim. Ancient astronaut believers often claim that humans are either descendants or creations of those extraterrestrials. Aliens supposedly came down from the skies and kickstarted our civilization. To back up their theories, these believers point to so-called out-of-place artifacts. They take ancient artwork, legends, or even unusual archaeological finds and say, look, that's proof of alien contact. Mainstream historians and archaeologists, of course, have different perfectly reasonable explanations for all this stuff, but ancient astronaut enthusiasts aren't convinced. Instead, they argue that gaps in our historical records and the mysteries we can't explain must be the work of extraterrestrials. So, how about we hear them out? The most famous proponent of ancient astronauts was Erich von Daniken, the author of the pseudo-scientific book, Chariots of the Gods. He popularized the theory that many ancient deities were actually aliens. He even suggested that those extraterrestrials were light-skinned and Aryan in appearance. Uh-oh. At the same time, the notion of ancient aliens didn't start with von Daniken. It traces back to the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Early sci-fi novels like Edison's Conquest of Mars and the works of H.P. Lovecraft first toyed with the idea. The concept took off in the 1950s, gained even more traction during the space race in the 60s, and became a worldwide phenomenon. And even though many critics discredited von Daniken's work by the 70s, his influence was strong in fringe circles. Surprisingly, scientists today agree that the idea of ancient astronauts isn't impossible, but they add that it's definitely unnecessary. The so-called mysteries of history can all be explained through science, archaeology, and good old human ingenuity. No aliens required. But ancient astronaut believers often point to religious texts, suggesting that myths about gods descending from the heavens are actually tales of aliens arriving on Earth. Take, for example, the Sumerian myth of the Anunnaki. Some people interpret it as aliens coming to our planet to mine gold and creating humans as their slaves. In Hindu mythology, there are flying vehicles called vimanas, which believers say are actually ancient spaceships. Now let's finally figure it out. Did aliens visit ancient humans? Well, some people think so, and they believe the Bible might actually have proof. For example, in the Bible's book of Genesis, there's a story about the sons of God marrying the daughters of humans. Their kids were called the Nephilim giants who roamed the planet. Some Christians think these sons of God were just different families of Adam and Eve's kids. But others, as well as ancient astronaut theorists, argue that those were actually aliens who mated with humans, creating half-human, half-alien hybrids. The King James Version of the Bible even translates Nephilim as giants. In the Book of Enoch, which adds more detail to Genesis, it says that 200 angels, known as the Watchers, came to Earth, bred with humans, and taught them all sorts of things like metallurgy, magic, and astrology. Those angels, disobeying God, were eventually locked up, and God sent a flood, aka the story of Noah's Ark, to wipe out the Nephilim and the humans who had learned forbidden knowledge. Ancient astronaut believers think that this story is about aliens who were supposed to simply observe humans but broke the rules and got involved, and their offspring are the very Nephilim half-alien giants. Some also say that modern UFOs carry those fallen angels or their descendants still roaming our planet today. Let's move on. In the book of Ezekiel, the prophet described a wild vision of a huge, fiery cloud with strange creatures and wheels sparkling like gems. Those beings had 4 faces, wings, and shiny bronze legs. The wheels with the help of which they moved were full of eyes and could go in any direction without turning. Sounds pretty sci-fi, huh? Ancient astronaut theorists believe Ezekiel described a spaceship, possibly piloted by extraterrestrial beings. This idea has been floating around, pun intended, since the 1950s. Some theorists also claim that the Ark of the Covenant, the sacred chest that held the 10 Commandments, was some kind of advanced alien technology. The same goes for other biblical objects like the Urim and Thummim used for divine communication. In the 1960s, some authors suggested that many biblical events, including miracles, were really alien tech at work. Even more shockingly, Barry Downing, a Presbyterian minister, even argued that Jesus himself was an extraterrestrial. He pointed to certain verses where Jesus said, "I am from above." The minister believed that it could have been the proof that Jesus had been an alien visitor. Some proponents also suggested that the biblical idea of hell could actually be the description of the planet Venus. The theory goes that ancient aliens might have shown early humans photos of Venus's fiery, inhospitable surface, and that inspired the idea of hell. They also claimed that God and Satan were alien beings who disagreed on whether humans should be given forbidden knowledge. Others compare this to the Greek myth of Prometheus, the hero who gave humans the knowledge of fire. Some even say that the original sin in the Bible, when Adam and Eve disobeyed God, was actually about alien offspring mixing with early humans. But hold on, there's even a claim that the Book of Invasions from Irish mythology, which talks about the arrival of the Tuatha De Danann, is actually about aliens arriving in Ireland. According to the legend, they came in dark clouds and caused the sun to disappear for 3 days. Ancient astronaut theorists think this could be a reference to spaceships with cloaking devices. Now, some people think that ancient artwork is full of clues that aliens visited Earth a long time ago. Let's dive deeper into the details. Ancient astronaut believers point to cave drawings, especially those from the Hopi and Zuni tribes, that show Kachina's certain spirit beings and say they might actually represent star people, which means extraterrestrials. They argue that similar drawings found around the world are proof that aliens visited many different ancient civilizations. There are also examples from places like Australia and Italy, drawings that look a lot like astronauts with dome-shaped helmets. Some people think those cave pictures show early humans encountering aliens wearing spacesuits. Another source of potential evidence comes from medieval and Renaissance paintings. Ancient astronaut fans claim that many artworks from this time show UFOs. For instance, in Madonna and Child with the Infant St. John, there's an odd object in the sky that people say looks like a flying saucer. You'll find more in other famous paintings like The Annunciation by Carlo Crivelli, Holy Trinity by Bonaventura Salimbeni, and Miracle of the Snow by Masolino da Panicale. However, experts, like Italian art historian Diego Cuoghi, argue that these objects aren't UFOs whatsoever. They symbolize religious ideas like angels, radiant clouds, and others. One of the most popular ancient astronaut claims is based on the Nazca lines in Peru. These huge ground drawings, depicting animals and geometric shapes, can only be fully seen from high above. Some think they were created according to instructions from aliens, or that the long lines might even have been runways for their spaceships. At the same time, archaeologists say there's no proof of this. They think the lines were actually used for ancient ceremonial purposes. One researcher even recreated a figure using just simple tools to show how they could have been made by the Nazca people themselves. But wait, there's more to consider. Some artifacts like the Sahara bird from Egypt and the Quimbaya artifacts from Colombia, Ecuador, are said to look like modern planes or gliders. Ancient astronaut believers think these might have been models of alien spacecraft, even though mainstream archaeologists are sure that they're just stylized representations of birds and insects. Then how about sites like the Pyramids of Giza, Machu Picchu in Peru, Baalbek in Lebanon, Stonehenge in England, and the Moai statues on Easter Island? They often get linked to the idea of aliens. These structures are so massive and precisely built that humans of the time couldn't have made them without help from extraterrestrials. Mainstream archaeologists don't agree and say ancient people had the skills and manpower to move even huge stones. There have been experiments showing that large megaliths can be transported using simple ancient technologies. And still, some believers argue that the sudden rise of ancient Egypt's advanced civilization, and especially the construction of the pyramids and the Sphinx, was due to extraterrestrial influence. Now look at these massive Moai statues on Easter Island. They have puzzled people for a long time. Some ancient astronaut believers say there's no way humans could have moved such heavy structures without using alien technology. But in the 1980s, a group of researchers figured out a method that involved using ropes that made the statues walk across the landscape with the help of just a small team of people. But how will you explain this fact? Some ancient cultures, including the Egyptians and some Native Americans, used to artificially lengthen the skulls of their children. Ancient astronaut believers think they did this to mimic the appearance of extraterrestrials, whom that they might have seen as deities. Pharaoh Akhenaten and his family, who are often depicted with elongated heads and other unusual features, have also sparked theories of alien influence. Scientists believe that such features were probably caused by a genetic disorder due to inbreeding, which was common in royal families. Akhenaten was known for worshipping the sun god Aten, and some suggest his focus on the sun could be tied to a disease that sunlight helped relieve. Now let's get one thing straight. Mainstream scientists and archaeologists are not buying ancient astronaut theories. They call this whole thing pseudoscience, arguing that such wild claims often twist, misinterpret, or even outright fake evidence. The Pentagon has recently released a report, and according to the New York Times, they haven't found any evidence of aliens, spaceships, or visits from extraterrestrials. Last summer, a former U.S. intelligence officer named David Grush claimed at a congressional hearing that the U.S. might have been hiding secret programs for decades to detect and study aliens and their tech. He even said the U.S. had pieces of alien spaceships and even actual alien remains. However, the 63-page report put together by the U.S. Department of Defense's Anomaly Resolution Office says that since the 1960s, people have been confusing American spy planes and drones with UFOs, or what they now call unidentified anomalous phenomena. Pentagon spokesperson Patrick Ryder said they were keeping an open mind, but found no proof of aliens or hidden government programs. He mentioned that most sightings were just normal objects or misidentifications. In February last year, after a few unidentified flying objects were shot down over the US and Canada, an interagency group was created to look into the whole UFO situation. At the time, John Kirby from the National Security Council noted that this phenomenon had been around for a long time, but previous administrations hadn't really tried to explain it. Now, why is the ancient astronaut theory so popular? The human brain needs an easy way to explain incomprehensible things, and blaming them on some extraterrestrial powers is a simple way to do it. The supporters of the theory often take fragments out of historical and cultural contexts, ignoring the broader meaning of those pieces. Plus, they assume that alien technologies must be similar to ours, and that aliens must be interested in the same things as humans, which would be very unlikely even if aliens existed. The ancient astronaut theory, despite its popularity in certain circles, is classified by the scientific community as pseudoscience since it does not comply with the principles of the scientific method and is often based on distortion of facts or false analogies. At the same time, come to think of it, the universe is unimaginably huge. Does it really sound possible that in the vast, constantly expanding cosmos, we're the only intelligent, technologically advanced civilization? What do you think? Write your opinion in the comments.
It's dark, and it's hot, and it's difficult to breathe deep underground in Cahokia mine in the heart of Botswana. It's been countless hours since your shift started, and yet another rock in your hands doesn't look promising. On the other hand, there is a tiny chance that it's the largest diamond you've ever found. You decide to inform your Canadian bosses from Lucara Diamond Corp. And bingo! The stone you found turns out to be a breathtaking 2,492 carat diamond, the second largest ever found. Now, the average engagement ring size is 1.7 carats. It means that just this diamond could be enough to supply rings for more than 1,465 brides. You can compare the size of the previous stone with the size of a fist. And the weight of this priceless giant is over a pound. Its value hasn't been determined yet, but how about we speculate a bit? So, another diamond from the same mine, called the Constellation, was sold for $63 million in 2016. And that was only 813 carats, less than a third of this new one's size. The only other discovered diamond that's larger is the famous Cullinan diamond. It was discovered in South Africa back in 1905 and weighed 3,106 carats. Now, calculate how many engagement rings we could make out of it and write the number down in the comments. Sadly, it was later cut into several smaller diamonds, and some of those pieces are now part of the British crown jewels. Interestingly, once there was an even larger diamond-like stone, a black diamond called Carbonado. It was found above ground in Brazil in the late 1800s. The coolest thing about it is that it may have come from a meteorite. The Sergio Carbonado, which is the stone's name, was broken into smaller pieces. They wanted to use it in industrial drill bits because it's one of the toughest materials on Earth. This new diamond was actually found with the help of advanced technology. The company used an X-ray system called Mega Diamond Recovery X-ray Transmission to detect the stone. This isn't the first record-breaking diamond Lucara has found at the Cahokia mine. Back in 2019, they discovered the Suelo diamond, which was 1,758 carats. At that time, it was the second largest diamond in the world. Luxury brand Louis Vuitton later purchased the gem for an undisclosed sum. And before that, in 2015, they found the Lassetti Larona diamond at the same mine. It weighed 1,109 carats and brought the company $53 million in 2017. Diamonds aren't the only amazing thing you can find in the ground. The better and deeper you dig, the rarer objects you're likely to discover, like an ancient lipstick, for example. It might be the oldest lipstick in the world since it's about 5,000 years old. This deep red lip paint was found in a stone vial in southern Iran. The vial actually popped up in 2001, but it took researchers until recently to figure out what it really was. Because it's not like modern lipstick in a tube. People likely applied it with a brush. Researchers are happy, since this find could give us a glimpse into what women from the Bronze Age might have done to stand out. Those from elite societies probably applied this lipstick to look glamorous and show off their high status. Now, here's the backstory of the vial. It came from a 3rd millennium BCE graveyard and was linked to the powerful Marhazi civilization. It was a big deal in that part of Mesopotamia at the time. The graveyard was uncovered after flooding, and unfortunately, looters got their hands on many items. But luckily, the authorities managed to recover this particular piece. The vial caught scientists' attention because it was different from other items they'd found. Normally, they'd come across gray, compact substances in similar containers. But when they opened this particular one, a loose, fine powder spilled out. It was dark grayish-purple in color, nothing like what they'd seen before. When the researchers analyzed the powder, they found out that it was made with hematite, which gave it a rich, deep red color. It also had other ingredients like vegetable oils and waxes, making it really similar to what you'd expect in a modern lipstick. Apparently, back in the Bronze Age, makeup was a sign of luxury and superior status in that area. It showed off wealth and power, especially in elite circles. By the way, the researchers don't want to claim for sure that this is the world's oldest lipstick, because who knows? Something older might turn up someday. How about we move to Bulgaria right now and do some digging there? Wait. There's no need to take a spade and dirty your hands. An amazing discovery is already waiting for you. There they found a large marble statue. It's almost 7 feet tall, which might depict Hermes, a Greek deity. But the craziest thing is that it was buried in an ancient sewer for around 2,000 years. The statue is in really good shape, especially the head, which is super well preserved. There are some cracks in the hands, but overall, it's in surprisingly great condition, according to the scientific director of the excavation. And here's how they found the statue. The team was doing a routine dig in southwestern Bulgaria, near the Greek border. This area used to be part of the ancient city of Heraclea Sintica, which dates back to the 4th century BCE. While digging, the researchers stumbled upon the statue's marble foot. From there, they carefully uncovered the rest of it. It was a total surprise for them, since they didn't expect to find anything like this. Right now, the team is working on safely removing the statue from the sewer. It's really heavy, so they're using a crane to lift it out and transport it to the History Museum in Petrich. Once they restore and conserve it, the plan is to put it on display. Experts are very excited about this find. It could teach us more about the local culture in Heraclea Sintica, which isn't a very well-known ancient site. Now, if you're dreaming of making discoveries like this one but don't have a degree, don't lose heart. Even an amateur can make a scientific breakthrough. For example, you could find a Roman dodecahedron. It's this weird, mysterious 12-sided metal object about the size of a grapefruit, and no one really knows what they're used for. Historians have been scratching their heads about these things for centuries. This particular dodecahedron was discovered last summer in a farmer's field near Norton Disney, about 35 miles southeast of Sheffield. A group of volunteers had already found Roman coins and brooches in the area, so they knew the field might hold more treasures. A geophysical survey had shown areas underground where the Earth's magnetic field was disturbed, hinting that something might have been hidden there. The team started digging trenches during a 2-week excavation. On the second to last day, in Trench 4, someone spotted the dodecahedron. Richard Parker, the group's secretary, was nearby making tea when he heard the shout. He said they were all shocked because they hadn't found much metal, and then, boom, that awesome artifact simply popped up. The extra cool thing about that dodecahedron was that it was complete, which is rare. Many others found before were broken or incomplete. Plus, it's larger than usual. Roman dodecahedrons can be as small as a golf ball, but this one is closer to a grapefruit. Now, the dodecahedron is on display at a local museum. So far, over 100 Roman dodecahedrons have been found in northwestern Europe, mostly in former Roman territories like the Gallo-Roman regions. They date back to somewhere between the 1st and 3rd centuries CE. Each one is a hollow metal shell, usually made of bronze. It has 12 faces, with differently sized holes on each face. Around the holes, there are concentric rings imprinted into the metal, and at every corner where the faces meet, there's a small stud. There's no writing on them, and nothing in Roman texts mentions them at all. That's why nobody knows what these dodecahedrons were for. There are loads of theories. They could have been toys, dice, mace heads, or even tools for measuring distances in Roman artillery. Some people even think they were used for knitting gloves or even figuring out dates using the stars. But most of those ideas don't really hold up, so the mystery remains. In 1850, French scientist Auguste Mariette went to Egypt looking for manuscripts, but accidentally found a head of a sphinx sticking out of the dunes. He cleared the sand and figured out the sphinx was guiding the entrance to some underground construction. Several months later, he finally entered the Serapium of Saqqara. Inside, he found an enormous granite sarcophagi with remnants of 64 bulls. Scientists are still amazed by the tech that the ancient Egyptians used to transport those enormous boxes. The Serapium was built around the year 3000 before the Common Era. It was an underground tomb built to honor the sacred Apis bulls of ancient Egypt. It had a long hallway, almost 500 feet long, with giant stone rooms on both sides. Some of the sarcophagi weighed as much as 50 average cars, and all of them were made with super precision, with exact 90-degree angles. These sarcophagi were beautifully decorated with hieroglyphs and carvings that told stories about the lives and importance of the Apis bulls. Now, there are 24 sarcophagi left. In ancient Egypt, Apis bulls were very special animals connected to the deity Ptah. They thought the bulls carried Ptah's spirit and wisdom, helped the pharaoh, and protected the Egyptians. Priests looked for special markings on young bulls to find Apis bulls. It could be a white triangle on its forehead, which symbolized divine light, a shape on its back like a vulture's wing, and a scarab shape under its tongue, which stood for rebirth. If a bull had these signs, they believed it was chosen by Ptah and treated it like royalty. The chosen bulls lived in a special temple in Memphis, the city where they worshipped Ptah. They received the best care and offerings from visitors who wanted their blessings. When an Apis bull passed away, it was treated with great honor and mummified. When Mariette entered the Serapium, he noticed traces of rollers on the gallery's floor and found 2 wooden horizontal winches. Each had 8 levers. Later, other explorers saw double rails. The burial chambers were lower than the hallway floor. To get the boxes into place, workers filled the chambers with sand so the sarcophagi could be rolled in straight. Then they slowly removed the sand to gently lower the boxes into perfectly cut spaces in the bedrock. A carved stone sign found in the Serapium said it took 28 days to move just one sarcophagus and its lid into its spot during the time of Ptolemy II. The extreme precision of the sarcophagi with 90-degree angles also has an explanation. Ancient Egyptians wrote texts, or rather, papyrus, on geometry a long time ago. It shows that they knew the approximate number pi and could calculate the volume of a pyramid with its top cut off. If they could figure out complicated math like that back then, it makes sense that they could also carve perfectly flat surfaces 500 years later. All this sounds pretty legit, but some people think certain things don't add up here. The size of boxes is way larger than the size of bulls, yet they buried pharaohs in tiny coffins that barely fit their bodies. The sarcophagi are made out of granite with crazy precision, and they could have just used limestone, which would have made things way easier. The transportation of the boxes seems pretty simple, but only in theory. If one person could pull about 440 pounds, then at least 250 people would be needed to pull just one box. The tunnels in the Serapium are really narrow, only about 2 feet wider than the boxes themselves. There's no way hundreds of people could have squeezed into those tight spaces to pull the boxes. And even if they did, how would they turn the box in the cramped corridor, lower it into its niche, and place it perfectly in the middle? Somehow, they did this 24 times, and every box is centered perfectly. Plus, the chambers were dusty, and there were no signs of soot from lamps. This means they must have worked in almost complete darkness. The real use of the boxes could also be different. A long time ago, even before the Egyptian pharaohs ruled, the local people already knew how to use fermentation. It happens when tiny organisms called yeast eat certain ingredients like starch and turn them into gas and ethanol. So someone in ancient Egypt probably put food like barley, bread, and even meat inside a giant stone box, then closed it tight with a heavy lid. These stone boxes, carved from granite, were so precisely made that they were almost completely sealed. so nothing could escape from it. As the yeast inside the box started working, it created more and more CO2 gas. It built up pressure inside the box. The granite boxes were incredibly strong. They could handle more pressure than a car tire can hold. When granite was squeezed under such pressure, its crystals produced a tiny electric charge. This effect was possible because granite contains quartz, a material that reacts to pressure this way. The process also needed meat or animal parts, possibly to help the yeast grow better. Meat contains something called oleic acid, which yeast needs to keep growing and to survive the bad effects of the ethanol it produces. As the pressure inside the box kept growing, the combination of gases and electricity made these boxes not just ancient fridges, but powerful energy systems. Over time, the pressure inside got so strong that it could push the lid open and the gas would escape with a pop. But when people rediscovered the Serapium in 1850, they found old drawings that showed piles of stones stacked on top of some of the box lids. So, someone long ago probably tried to make the lids even heavier by adding extra weight to make it harder for the gas pressure to push them open. This extra weight also meant the quartz crystals in the granite could keep creating more electricity under all that pressure. If someone opened one of these stone boxes thousands of years later, they would only find bones from bulls that were placed in the box. And that's exactly what Marriott discovered in the 1850s. They opened the Serapium for visitors soon after the first excavations in the second half of the 19th century. Prince of Wales even had a luncheon with his guests in one of the sarcophagi. Sands and earthquakes made the site inaccessible for a while, but now you can visit it again and try to solve the mystery yourself. With new tech, we could have answers to many other historical mysteries soon. A team of scientists at Chicago's Field Museum of Natural History recently used a special CT scanner to learn more about ancient Egyptian mummies without unwrapping them. They gently rolled 26 mummies on custom carts out to the parking lot, where the scanner was waiting. It took thousands of detailed X-ray pictures of each mummy and their coffins. When all the pictures were put together, they created 3D images that showed what was inside, the skeletons, and some artifacts. The scientists hope these images will help them understand ancient Egyptian burial practices from over 3,000 years ago. Even though the scanning process only took 4 days, it might take 3 years to study all the data. But scientists were able to learn some personal details about the mummies. One of the most popular mummified individuals at the museum, Lady Chineta, was a woman who lived in ancient Egypt about 3,000 years ago. It looks like she passed away in her late 30s or early 40s. To make sure her body looked complete for the afterlife, embalmers put stuffing in her neck to keep it from collapsing. They also placed artificial eyes in her sockets, so she would have eyes in the next world. She was wrapped in fancy linen and placed in a beautifully decorated coffin. The scans revealed that it had been carefully crafted with a slit at the back, which embalmers used to fit the body. There were also some artistic details on the surface, like markings for her knees. It looks like her burial was on the scale of a high-end luxury car.